The opioid epidemic is affecting communities across our nation. 1 in 14 Americans reports experiencing a substance use disorder.
In response, the Northwest Georgia Department of Public Health Opioid Program has filmed 9 recovery testimonials for inspiration, encouragement, and hope to those struggling with substance use disorder, those seeking recovery, or their loved ones. These are stories of recovery.
It can be anyone. It doesn't discriminate.
My name is Beth.
Dexter.
Catherine.
Lee.
Beth.
My name's Josh.
Lydia.
Brandon.
Jessica.
I grew up in a little town called Kingston.
I was born in Rome, Georgia.
So I am from a small town. It's called Cedartown.
Well, I was born and raised in Haralson County in West Georgia.
We lived in Powder Springs, and we then moved to Paulding.
I grew up here in Cartersville, Georgia. It was just a family community.
I grew up with both parents in the home. They're still married today. This is their 50th year they've been married.
My dad he preached at a church in the small town that I'm from.
I come from, I guess, a semi-normal family. It was me and my older brother.
My mother was 16 when she had me, so she was kind of a baby raising a baby. She came from a family of 9 siblings and my grandmother by herself, so it was a little chaotic growing up, to say the least.
I came from a family of 4. My older brother, my mom, my dad. And I grew up in a home that was faith-based. My mom made us go to church every Sunday.
Both my parents are prior military, so strict rules, but pretty loving. We weren't really raised in church or anything, but just normal childhood.
It's like a never-ending, vicious ball that spirals. You can't stop it.
Most of the men in my life growing up, they dealt with alcohol abuse. Alcohol was a part of the culture.
Well, the first time that I had ever came in contact with substance use disorder was my, like I said, my family, my parents. But no one really explained to me what it was. It was just a situation where I knew that my family, I knew that my parents weren't present in my life, but I didn't know why.
The first time that I ever tried methamphetamines, I was 20 years old. I just hanging out with a friend and just done it.
At 13 years old, we moved down south, and my mom and dad split up, and I went to work with my dad. He was in construction, and I never went back to school at 13. I essentially went from like a regular old 13-year-old riding his bike and all that, like thrown into a grown man's shoes, I guess you could say. I believe I was an alcoholic by the time a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 14 years old.
I started using marijuana and drinking when I was about 15. And I went straight to hard drugs by the age of 16. I was using cocaine, pills.
I started tampering my junior year, the summer of my junior year. But my senior year is the summer of my senior year, man, I went wild.
So I dabbled a little bit in high school. I was expelled 2 weeks into my sophomore year.
I was 14 years old, and I had been through a lot in my life, but there was sexual abuse going on inside my home. So when a group of friends was smoking pot behind the dumpsters at the high school, I thought, why not? And that first time was all it really took.
When I started dabbling around with substances, I was about 15 years old. Eventually, within about a 2-year span, I started using methamphetamine with my mother. By 17, I was sent to prison for trafficking cocaine. I spent 2.5 years in prison off of a 5-year sentence. And it was probably about 6 months before I went back to drugs.
It affects every aspect of your life. It poisons your mind.
I would say most of my addiction, started with
low self-esteem, just not having esteem, trying to find my way, trying to fit in. Just got out of control and it didn't go with my life. I missed college. I had a couple of offers.
I had found out that I was pregnant and I had an abortion. And I couldn't mentally cope with what I had done. I couldn't handle it. And I turned to the thing that I thought would make me feel different. The more I done, the less I had to think about it.
I gave birth to a baby boy named Jason Carter, and he never breathed, and he never cried. And I thought, how fair is this, you know? So after that, of course, the hospital sent me home with Percocets, and that was all she wrote. I had that happy back, I had that fake euphoria that could numb everything that was going on. From that point forward, I used heavily for the next couple of years. I got pregnant a couple years later and gave birth to my son, Lucas Gavin, and he breathed and he cried. And you would think that that was enough, you know? He was the most beautiful thing I ever seen in my life. And but again, the hospital sent me home with Percocets.
I lost custody of my children, and I ultimately signed adoption papers for them. I went into a spiral of addiction that I had never been in before.
At 17 years old, my mother was murdered because of her substance use. You know, and I like to think that if she wasn't doing drugs, she probably wouldn't have been in a scenario that caused her to lose her life. So from 17 to 25 is when I really kind of fell off the deep end, and I was just using anything and everything that I could to not have to feel my natural emotions.
It progressively gets worse, in and out of rehabs and jails.
Eventually you lose everything. Pills, you lose everything.
Well, so me and my friend had a fight. We were in the trailer, right? And I had him on the ground and I had almost choked him to death. At that moment, I felt a release of, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I literally almost just killed a person. And I didn't want that. I don't want that on my soul. I didn't want that, you know, taking over my mind for the rest of my life.
I overdosed in 2017, and I died. Once on the way to the hospital and once in the emergency room. Narcan saved my life. I was in ICU for about a week after that, and my family came. And I remember my mom telling me that that was the most selfish thing that I could ever do, was die and leave my family to clear up the wreckage of my past.
And you know, at one point, my grandmother told me that she wished that either she would die or that I would die, so that she would not have to go through the pain that she'd been going through for so long. You know, she said, I don't want to lose you, but I can't keep doing this.
Something changed in that moment. Like I knew that God He sent me her to save my life, because I was gonna die. I was gonna die from either a man or from all the drugs that I was doing to numb all the feelings.
I feared for my life, and I'm glad that happened.
I knew something had to change. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to be out of my children's lives. I didn't want to be out of my husband's life. I didn't want to keep disappointing my family. I wanted to be a functioning member of my family and add something.
And I know there's many pathways in recovery, and everybody's is different. But the dysfunction that I was going through, it was the word that my mother had taught me that brought me back to reality.
And I knew if I would just go report to probation, they would drug test me and I would go to jail again. But I was safe there. I was safe, you know. Nobody could hurt me. Drugs weren't as accessible in there, you know. So I went and reported, and of course, they locked me up.
When I went to jail, like the drugs got out of my system long enough and my head cleared like a moment of clarity, and I was like, I cannot live my life the way I've been living my life. I don't care what I have to do. I just knew that I was not gonna get out of jail and go back to the life I had been living. There was no way. I knew I was going to die.
Yeah, that was the first step. It was getting away from that house, getting away from that environment, and completely putting it behind me. For the first 4 years, I struggled. I really struggled because I didn't have anybody. Not anybody to talk to about it. It was such a taboo thing.
I didn't know that recovery was even a thing. I just thought that there was people that did drugs and there was people that didn't do drugs. And I was just going to stop doing drugs, and that my life was going to keep operating under the manner in which it was. And I came to find out that in order to stop doing the drugs, if I wanted to get better, I had to change everything.
The hardest part for me has been changing behaviors. I had to learn that there is a giant difference between sobriety and recovery.
In recovery, you got to change everything.
I didn't know how to stay clean in the real world. It's easy when you're completely removed from life. It's easy when you're in treatment because it's not accessible. When you're back in your own life, it's a lot more accessible.
When I got out of treatment, I got tied into the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. I felt like I was at home immediately. And you know, what I was able to do is I was able to use that fellowship to structure my recovery.
When I found peer support, it changed my life because they got me. They were just like me.
Those guys taught me more than I knew about myself. I mean, than anybody else, you know. Having a physical representation of somebody to hold your hand or hug you or let you cry on the shoulder, you know, I didn't have that, and that was the hardest thing is that lack of connection.
When your life is brought down to nothing and when you're rebuilding it, you're scared and you're unsure.
But now at 51, I have no regrets on what I went through, because in every single area where there's been a loss from school, baseball, the things that I'm doing now with the youth, having my own nonprofit, I wouldn't have been able to help these kids at all. I wouldn't have been able to give them any insight, and I know it's all God.
I am now an employee of the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, where I support peers at the Bartow County Peer Support Wellness and Respite Center.
I have been at Mosaic Place for over 4 years now. What that has done for me is it's given me a recovery community that I can laugh with, I can cry, I can be myself. And the biggest thing is that I see that there's not just one pathway to recovery. And that was huge for me because I thought I had to conform to this one way of things.
And then I got the job at Mosaic because they had a position open up for peer navigator. And I really wanted it. I've been there 3 years now, almost. We support all pathways to recovery.
I get to be the executive director of Living Proof Recovery in Rome, Georgia, and that's a giant recovery community organization that is beautiful. I get to walk alongside people every day and hold their hand and be like, it doesn't matter what anybody's got to say. You're not hopeless. You can get better. Let me show you.
I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome because for such a long time, I thought that I was just an addict and that's all that I would ever be is an addict. And I would find myself in situations and be like, eventually somebody's gonna figure me out and come in here and say, hey, you're not supposed to be here. You know, but I think that that's my own stuff that I've got going on. That's my character defect. You know, I've worked very hard to become who I am today. Everything is different. You know, the people that I'm around, everything changed. My taste in music changed. I became a completely different individual.
I, today, am still a woman in long-term recovery, but I'm also a homeowner, which I never thought would be possible.
So for me today, my recovery is, I'm proud of me.
So now today, I do try to go out of my way to try and be a good friend, be a good mom, take care of my responsibilities
I'm a better mom, a better aunt, a better sister, friend.
I'm a fighter today, and I'm bold, and I'm strong.
I'm a grateful individual that understands that there is hope, there is life past addiction, there is life past substance use disorder. And when you're stuck in your addiction, there is no hope. So I like to think that I try to provide hope to every individual that I come in contact with, because that's what was provided to me. Somebody gave me just a glimmer of hope, and that was what I was able to establish my recovery upon.
It's truly a different way of life. I'm just not giving up alcohol. I'm starting to learn how to live.
I no longer live for the moment, I live in the moment. There's a difference.
I don't want to go back.
It cut into every facet of my life, whether it be relationships, school, definitely with my parents.
I would like for families to know that it's not their fault, you know, and the best thing that I feel like they can do is when that time comes and your loved one reaches out their hand, please have your hand there, because it might be that time. It might be that time that they get it and that they're ready.
Biggest thing I can say for the families is, don't give up on them.
To the family of someone struggling, don't give up on them. Don't make them feel alone more than they already do in their mind.
Family members, don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. Make boundaries. Set those boundaries and keep them, because your sanity means just as much as ours, but just don't give up on them. Love them, even if you have to love them from afar.
Give them tough love. That's what I would tell a family member. Give them tough love, but be there for them and be persistent in that love, but you don't have to enable them in that, right?
Don't ever think that your loved one is incapable of change. The opposite of addiction is human connection. So if they can make that positive connection, they have a chance to find recovery. They have a chance to end substance use disorder.
Substance use alienates people. It alienated me. You come with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt.
So I would say to somebody who's seeking recovery, just do it scared. See what happens. And if it doesn't work out this time, do it again. If it doesn't work out that time, do it again. What do you have to lose?
Don't give up before the miracle happens.
You got to keep your eye on the prize. You've got to remember that you got to be stronger than the struggle.
Don't ever give up hope.
You are not alone. You may feel alone. You may feel that you're different than other people, but what I've learned is our details may be different, but our stories are the same.
It takes one decision of being tired, of being sick and tired. It takes waking up one morning and saying that enough is enough. I'm tired of this. I want different. I want better.
If you can just put a little bit of effort, just a tiny bit, just one day. If you could just go one day and do something, like go into an addiction recovery support center or to a church or whatever it is that you want to do, that it's definitely not impossible. You can do it.
Find someone that you're comfortable communicating with. Don't be ashamed of the things that you've went through, because in reality, everything that you've went through is going to help somebody else overcome.
Get connected. If the meetings help you, if church helps you, whatever it takes, can be beat or it can be dealt with. You can live with it. It's not the end of the road.
You are loved, you are valued, and you matter. Even if you're still in active addiction, like there's hope. There are people here. I love you and I support you wherever you are in life.
It's doable. It's very, very, very doable. I'm a living witness.
No one is lost. No one is beyond hope. No one is beyond saving. That Whether you believe it or not and what you've heard, you matter. Your life matters. And there are so many ways to recover. There's so many ways to get better. There's so many multiple pathways. And you have everything you need inside of you. You just find that recovery connection and you can do anything. People in recovery, we can do anything.